It's the NHL All-Star break, so we've decided to bring an All-Star on this edition of Hockey Inside Out. Hello and welcome to another episode of Hockey Inside Out. I'm your host, Jessica Rusnak. Joining us on the panel today, we've got Rick Green, former NHLer, Stanley Cup champ, and former assistant coach with the Montreal Canadiens. We've Andrew Berkshire, independent hockey analyst. And the third guy, you know him, Chris Nilan. And you can catch Chris on his podcast, Raw Knuckles Podcast. Chris, thanks for joining us again this week.
Yeah, no problem. Good to be here again.
So as of the All-Star break, the Canadiens sit 7th in the Atlantic, 9 points out of a wild card spot. They've got 33 games remaining in the season. How do you see the rest of the season playing out? Chris, why don't you start us off with your thoughts?
Well, I don't see them making the playoffs. I didn't since the beginning of the season. I thought they might be just outside, 5-6 points, maybe battling, at least trying. Things don't look good for this team right now. And I say that they play well in spurts. They don't have any consistency. There's one thing I believe they do consistently bad, and that's give up a lot of shots. And they play loose in their own end of the rink and at times rather confused. I'll just take the goal, shorthanded goal Ottawa scored in the last game. The first goal of the game. They had 4 forwards on the ice and a defenseman. They had the defenseman lined up on the boards. The Canadiens lose the draw, and nobody covered the front of the net. Mike, what's his name? Mike Matheson. He was on the boards. What's he doing on the boards? He's a defenseman. They have a forward in front of the net supposedly covering their other forward. Guy was all alone. How can the goaltender be expected to stop that? So,
sorry, Knox, but they expected the forward to play in front of the net, and
but he didn't.
What happened?
Right out to the point, right? And there's something wrong there when you have you got one defenseman on the ice and he's covering the boards. Hello. The wingers should be on the boards, and the defenseman should be in front of the net. Little things like that. They don't play well in their own end of the rink.
Well, for me, let's face it, this last stretch after the All-Star break is always a critical time, especially, with the parity in the league and, how close it is in the standings. Every point means that much more, and it's a real battle. And, the Canadiens, as much as, you'd like to give them some hope, I won't completely write them off, but there's going to have to be obviously some huge wins and some consistency in putting some points up to get to the 96 point to get into the playoffs. And I don't see that really happening with
then write them off. Have some balls.
Hey, look at Edmonton, right? Look, Edmonton, they get themselves on a roll. The goalie stands on their head. They got their top players continuing to deliver. I
can't believe you're comparing Edmonton to Montreal. Come on.
Well, I'm not comparing. I'm just talking about the situation that could maybe happen with some of those guys overperforming, if you will. Long shot, but nothing is out of reach. But it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for them, especially with the way they're playing. And you touched on how they play in their zone with the run and gun and kind of everybody running around and not really knowing what they should do and when they should do it is an accident waiting to happen. We've seen it a number of times, but it's what it is. We have to give them some hope, but I think it's going to be a real long shot for them to find their way in.
Yeah, I'm with Chris that it's not going to happen. I think that this team wasn't built to contend for the playoffs right now anyway. So it makes sense that we're in this situation where they have some big holes in their roster, in their structure. Like Chris and Rick both said, the defensive structure is not great. I'm interested to see when they get to a point where they want to start making the playoffs, how much that defensive zone structure changes, because it seems like they're trying to do similar to what Colorado does with that like more positionless hockey where the forwards come back and end up taking the defensive roles. And we see it game in and game out where like a lot of times it just doesn't work, right? They're players who have played a different way their whole lives, played within a certain structure their whole lives. And, they're being asked to do a lot. It can be confusing at times. People get their brains crisscrossed a little bit, two guys going to the same man sometimes. But it's also a team in flux, right? This is a team that's supposed to be rebuilding. They are overperforming for what this roster is, especially with Kirby Dach out from the beginning of game 2 of the season. So I think you look at compared to last year, goals against are down a little bit. Goals for are actually also down a little bit. Their record is a little bit better than it was at this time last year. There's little bits of improvement hidden in a very mixed bag team. And I think the biggest thing to look forward to is that the players that you really need to improve, that you really need to have in the future of the team, are all having step forward seasons. Like the big names like Caden Gooley, Cole Caulfield, Nick Suzuki, Uri Slavkovsky. And now that Cole Caulfield is scoring like we expect him to score, it looks even better because his defensive play has come a long way. So there's positives, but at the same time, I think everybody should be realistic about the goals of this team, and it's not to make the playoffs.
And when a team gives up almost 3.5 goals against, as an average, this doesn't work. You look at all the teams that are having success in, around the league. That part of the game has to be much better, and it doesn't seem to be getting much better. And that's a real area, like we touched on before, that in order for them to get any type of run going, they're going to have to patch that up and get the guys believing in maybe defense first instead of just playing a run and gun.
So with that being said, how far away do you think this team is to being an actually a cup contending team or a competitive team in the NHL? How many years down the road do you think Habs fans have to wait? Rick, what do you think about that?
Well, it would be really nice to see their full roster healthy for a year, which seems to be a huge challenge to get a real reading on just where they're at in the league. I don't foresee them making a huge impact next year, even if they have their full lineup, unless they're able to find a way to, and I believe that they will, change up some of their personnel because we know that there's going to be a logjam back on the blue line. There's going to be too many defensemen that are, itching to play. They're going to have to, lighten up the numbers with that group. And then, obviously up front, they're struggling to find guys that can score, and there's no easy fix on that. But they do have some players that I think they might end up turning into possible trades that maybe will help them a year or 2 years down the road.
Yeah, it could be a situation where they get super lucky and draft Macklin Celebrini this summer. They'd have to fall a little bit in the standings to have a chance of that, a decent chance of that. And then it makes the rebuild go faster. If they don't end up getting a star quality forward this summer, then we're probably still 2 to 3 years away. You look at the teams that have won cups through rebuilding, Tampa Bay, Chicago, Pittsburgh, and all those teams were bad for a stretch of like 4 to 5 years. They needed those like four to five top 10 picks, top 5 picks to complete a team to get going and being a consistent contender. I think the Canadiens have more advantages at the moment than a lot of those teams did, in that they had really good young pieces going into this rebuild in Suzuki, Caulfield, Gooley, etc. But they need more to round the roster out. And I think the organization is very aware of that. And despite the fact that they say things like, we expect improvements this season, maybe we'll contend for a playoff spot. I know they haven't really said that vocally, but it seems like they want them to play competitive hockey, even knowing that I think they're aware that this is not close. The culture, I think, is close. The team culture is close. They play extremely hard almost every night. I think more than most teams in the NHL do, but the talent level is not close yet.
Yeah, listen, they do play hard. I agree with that. But, boy, I think they need more direction defensively. I think we already talked about that. But as far as how close they are, 2 to 3 years, what are we talking about? Stanley Cup?
I think playoffs.
They're probably, playoffs, I'm going to say 3 to 4 years to be a consistent contender. And I'll err on the 4 side, because to build a team and get the pieces, and they have a lot of pieces, certainly a lot of defensemen in this the organization, but those offensive pieces, yes, and then putting together that third and fourth line, those big bodies. You see Vegas, a big hockey team. Anybody who wins the Stanley Cup is a big, strong team with talent. And there's certainly some talent here, but, boy, they need size and strength, especially when you talk about bottom 6 forwards. In the top, you have to be able to insulate some guys. But, it's going to take some time, boy. I like some of the players that are here, and big guys like Anderson and Monahan, good-sized guys that can play the game. You're going to need some more of those type of players as you start to, maybe move some of these pieces and get more draft picks. You got to draft some size, too, along with the talent that you're going to need to be that consistent force in the playoffs year in and year out, and then eventually vying for the Stanley Cup. But I'd say 3 to 4 years, to be honest with you, maybe 3 years to really be a consistent contender.
Now, there's some mixed reviews when it comes to the coaching. You have one side that thinks that Martin St. Louis is doing a great job. But then there's another side that's probably been a little bit more vocal in the last few weeks, saying that maybe Patrick Roy should have been the guy that was hired to coach this team when they were making a coaching change. He was available. Now Patrick Roy ends up in Long Island. We're lucky enough to have Chris and Rick on the show today, 2 of his former teammates. I'll get you guys to start us off. What do you think it would have been like if Patrick Roy was hired? And do you think the Canadiens missed an opportunity to bring him in as the head coach?
Listen, I think Marty's done a pretty good job. Again, I worry about this team defensively, for sure. I think he's done a good job with some of these kids, and no question. Is he the right guy for the moment? I like where they're at. Patrick, I think at this point, he's coached a lot of kids in junior, and he's had a lot of success that way. I don't know if some of those tactics are going to work at the NHL level. I think Patrick is a good tactician. He understands systems and what he wants from his players, and he's demanding. I don't know if this is the right time for a guy like Patrick, to be honest. Could he have worked with these kids? No question. Maybe down the road when they're a bit more mature, all of them as players, I could see it maybe happen at some point. Maybe not. But I certainly think he's capable. But at this point, I'm fine where we're at. It's like I said, we're 3-4 years away. I truly believe that. And if Marty's the guy for these guys until that point, then he is. And if they realize at some point they got to make a change, they will. But I'm okay with where we're at right now. I don't think bringing Patrick in here would have changed a whole lot.
And I think the bottom line here is Martin St. Louis was brought in to try and push all the buttons to get the team to play a more competitive game and, help develop some of the young guys. And, he has done that with kind of a mixed bag of, guys in the lineup, out of the lineup. But there comes a point in time, as we all know, where the coach has to be held accountable for finding ways to win. And he has a little bit of a leeway because the team has been consistently talking about rebuild. So that buys some patience. And, moving in the clock forward here, you're going to have to see a lot more positive results, as in different areas, whether it's special teams, defensive zone play, offensively. You're going to have to see improvement in those areas. And ultimately, the head coach is the one that's got to have to face the music. The GM, brought in St. Louis because they felt that he was the kind of guy that they could use at this particular time. Patrick, he's an emotional guy. He's going to have his team playing, the best they can play with what he has. As far as the timing of this goes, I think that people have to understand also that it's not just the coach. You've got the guys upstairs that you have different personalities, and the personalities have to blend in a good way so that they're all on the same page and can try and get along the best way they can. And not to say that Patrick couldn't do that in Montreal, but I'm saying that it's really critical that you have personalities and people in place in the upper management that can work together on the same goal, and that is to have some success. And time will tell in the coaching ranks.
I think you're totally on the money, Rick. I think there's 2 points in a team's their lifetime, essentially, for a roster, where having that complete agreement or like a good flow between management and coaching is the most important. Number one is during a rebuild where it can get really taxing, and coaches want to win, everybody wants to win, so it's you got to keep that emotion in there. You got to keep the heads high in the room when you're going to lose most of your games, and then when you're actually a top competitor where the stress level is extraordinarily high, right? You don't want people snapping at each other in those 2 moments. Those are very critical moments in team building. And I'm not saying that Patrick Waugh wouldn't be able to navigate those situations, but I do wonder if he would be patient enough to go through an entire rebuild with a team. I don't think he has an issue working with kids. He's proved that in junior hockey, but just would he be willing to sit there for 4 or 5 years and not win? Patrick Waugh, the ultimate winner, right? Like that's what he's known for, is that competitive spirit throughout his career. So I think he's the kind of guy you bring in when you want to take it to that next level. I'm not saying that that's going to happen here. St. Louis might be similar to Rod Brindamore, right? Where he's the guy the whole time. But I think that fits more with Patrick Waugh's philosophy and how he coaches than bringing him in for a rebuild. So I don't think that that's a missed opportunity in this situation.
Yeah, I don't. And again, coaching kids is one thing, but coaching kids that are making millions of dollars is another thing. And as far as getting along with management, listen, that was 8 years ago. What happened in Colorado? Whatever, 8, 9 years ago. Patrick left. Boom, he's on his own, and now he's back with Lou. I'm sure Lou, I know Lemaire is a confidant of Lou's. I'm sure they talked at length about this, and they probably laid the law down with Patrick, and said, listen, here's the deal. You're coaching the team. That's it. We make the decisions on players, and there may be times that they'll talk to him about those things, moves they're going to make, and maybe make them feel welcome in that, but they're certainly not going to let him take the reins and have such a forceful voice like he tried to have in Colorado.
And I think, Nuts would be in agreement that the players run the show, the players make it happen. The coach today, you have to walk a fine line to make sure that you don't upset too many guys too often to get them to perform, because we know where that's going to go. But you got to have the type of personnel that really want to do it together, happy together, and are driven by the coach to have a good relationship and show up each and every night. And man, oh man, it's tough when you see some of the ego of some of these guys. And if they decide to play, they'll play, and if they don't, your hands are kind of tied. But it's a challenge to try and find players with their heart in the right direction, in the right place, and then obviously try to get them to play within a system that's going to give them success, that's directed by the coach, but ultimately the players are the ones that make it happen.
Okay, moving on to rapid fire. I want to get your thoughts on Brendan Gallagher's suspension, 5 games for his hit right before the bye week. Andrew, do you think that this was suitable for the hit?
For me, I would have wanted a significantly longer suspension, but based on what the Department of Player Safety is doing for a first-time offender, I suppose it makes sense. But it's so rare in today's game that you see a hit that's both an elbow, a hit to the head, and the puck is already gone. And that trifecta is just so against everything they've been trying to get done in this league. I thought that they would really throw the book at him on this one. So I guess good for Gallagher that they only got 5 games, but he's got to sort himself out, because you can tell when he's not having fun, when he's frustrated, he does stuff that's out of character. And it was so wildly out of character for Brendan Gallagher that it was shocking. But I guess they got it right based on their own standards. My standards would be a little bit stricter.
I mean, yes, out of character, I agree. For me, that was too many games for a first-time offender. It's not in his nature to do those type of things. If you look at his career and the way he plays, very seldom do you see something like that coming from Brendan Gallagher. It was strictly kind of a last-minute reaction, if you will, that maybe I can catch a piece of him. You roll the dice like that, you catch somebody, and it's not just the injury itself. I think a lot of it is tied into just how long this player could possibly be out versus the initial penalty, and it's what it is. They're trying to eliminate that, but for Brendan Gallagher, a little bit too much for my liking. I would have thought 3 games for a first-time offender. And, that's just, you never know what you're going to get when the...
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Rick. The 3 games, first-time offender, doesn't have a record, Brendan usually on the receiving end, a lot of that, like getting a cross-check to the mouth in the playoffs and they don't do anything. I liken that elbow to a D-man or a forward at times when someone... steps inside him or just makes that last second move and they stick their leg out. Reactionary. Brendan was coming across the ice here. Now, I don't know if they had anything going on in the game or there was some bad blood going on there. I don't know. But Brendan coming across, I think he got kind of ahead of himself and the guy wanted to kind of cut in behind him. He was going to get in behind him, and I just think he reacted in a bad way. It was a reactionary penalty. I would have been fine with 3 games. I don't think the intent was there. Oh, I'm gonna knock this guy's block off, like something I would do back in the day. I really don't think that was his intent. I think it was reactionary, and I certainly think 5 was a little much. 3 would have been fine.
Now, we saw a little bit of a lineup change with Slavkovsky being taken off that first line, replaced with Josh Anderson. Do you think this was the right move? Let's get Rick's thoughts first.
Well, I'm a little disappointed. Slav, I really enjoyed his progress as of late. I think the kid has really found a way to play better at the NHL level and contribute in many more positive ways than he was before. So to take him off that line, trying to build some chemistry. They had some chemistry going. They seem to be feeding off each other, and now they make that change. So anyways, that's what's been going on the whole year. Now it's, basically up to Slav to say, okay, it's what it is. Take advantage of my opportunity to play when I play and continue to try and improve his skill set and his ability to play at the NHL level.
Yeah, I think my thoughts on that whole situation is I want to know the coaching staff's intent with it. If it's because they wanted, like they saw the game before where Anderson had a bit of jump on that top line in the 3rd period and they decided that Anderson deserved the promotion, I really don't like it because I don't understand this organization's fascination with that player. Anderson gives you 1 game where he's incredible every 5 or 6, and for the rest of the time, he's kind of a black hole who sinks his line. It's just a consistent problem ever since he was acquired. He sinks his line. They spend almost their entire time in the defensive zone defending, allowing scoring chances, and the result with Caulfield and Suzuki over the last couple games here has been terrible. They've been the worst line on the team in terms of what they're able to accomplish at even strength. However, if the intent was a placeholder on that line to see if Slafkovsky can take what he learned with Caulfield and Suzuki and become his own player, where he's not the third wheel on the line that just gets things done and tries to take a step offensively, then I kind of understand it a little bit more. And watching Slafkovsky play with Monahan, especially the last game against Pittsburgh, he was a monster. He had 5 shots. He was one of the best players on the team in terms of pushing play up the ice. He was excellent. And I think him and Monahan work together very well. Monahan almost looks like a dad out there. He's always looking for Slafkovsky, trying to set him up for shots, which is good for that young player to get those shots on net. Feel the puck. Remember that you don't just have to always pass it to Cole Caulfield, right? So if that's the plan, totally okay with it. But if it's about promoting Anderson, I don't.
Yeah, listen, this team is in a rebuild, and what's going to happen pretty soon is the trade deadline's coming up. Maybe they're trying to make Josh Anderson look better by putting him up on that top line. Maybe if they get him going, maybe if he scores a few more points at the right time, scores some goals, and trade deadline comes, and they're not just talking about moving Monahan. They're also talking about maybe moving Josh Anderson and getting some true value there. So maybe they're trying to increase his value by putting him there. Is it going to work out? Who knows? We got to wait to see. But, I certainly seen that. He's played in spurts. He got going there for a while. And then, and again, some of these players, these older players, veteran players, being part of a rebuild is not an easy task, A lot of pressure on you to lead the way every night and come up with the points and show these kids the way. There's a lot of heat on guys like that. I remember coming in Montreal, and Rick, you can attest to that. And everybody was looking for Larry to do it every night. He was a, older defenseman at the time, 28, 29. He had won Stanley Cups, but, some of the young guys were always looking to Larry to do it, relying on Larry and Bob Gainey, and until they learned they had to start to carry most of the load. Those guys, really helped those older guys to be better players at their age at the time. So, it depends why they're doing it, I guess. And I think really it's, looking to see if they can increase his trade value.
Now, I'm going to start with Chris, but then I want Rick to jump in because I know you're the president of the OL Armia fan club. But he's got 8 goals and is a +1 on a team that's having trouble scoring goals. Do you think that he's unfairly criticized, Chris?
I like Joel Armia. I do. He's the type of guy you can win with in the playoffs. Regular season, you're going to get spurts of good play, and it's all about consistency. That's when you superstars in this game are consistent every night. They're scoring, they're doing something, they have an input. That's why Yoel is not a superstar. He has a lot of talent. He can skate. He's a smart player, but he's certainly a guy. And I often say it a lot of time, the Finns are dead from the ass up. You don't know if they're, what's going on there. I like Yoel Armia. Playoff time, and we saw what he did in the playoffs for this team when they went to the Stanley Cup final. He was a big part of that, So you need those guys at the right time on your team to be effective. And those third and fourth line guys in the playoffs, man, they're worth their weight in gold. And he's one of those guys. And people get frustrated with him during the season because he looks some nights like he's not trying or he's ineffective. But, again, I'm a big fan of his. I really am. I like Yoel. And listen, they kicked his ass down to Laval, and he seemed to have woken up. We've seen a better player since he's been back. But, again, Yoel's more of a playoff player than a regular season player.
And in all honesty, I've got to give him full credit for, when he came back from Laval, he came to realize that he needs to do more on a consistent basis, and he is doing it.
Did you say moron?
Moron. Yeah, two words.
Okay.
And I get frustrated when I see some of the things that he does. I'm still not a huge fan. I would sooner see in the position that he's in, given the opportunity for some of the younger kids in Roy or Ylonen, these kind of kids, which is the future. And I just, he came up big in the playoffs, but I still have a concerned, long term as far as how long this is going to last. And the future is about rebuilding with youth. And I think they have a lot of guys in the system that could deserve an opportunity to play, and kind of put him out of the picture.
Trade him.
Well, if you were to ask last season around the league, there would be no chance that you'd be trading UL Armia. What are the offers going to be? This season might be a different question, especially if the Canadiens have the capacity to retain on that contract. There's only one more year left. And he's shown this year, like Chris said, exactly why everyone loved him so much in the playoffs, why he got that contract. He's having a very, very strong season, on pace for 20 goals over 82 games, defensively really rock solid. But he's built to be a frustrating player, right? 6'3", 216 pounds, should be like a power forward, but he doesn't physically engage that often. He plays a little bit slow. I don't know if you guys have gotten a chance to check out the NHL's edge data this year, but he's one of the slowest players in the league in terms of how often he's able to have a speed burst over 20 kilometers an hour. He's, I think, among the 50 slowest.
Is, so.
Yeah, it's just speed tracking, essentially. It's just how fast players skate once in a while. I don't know how useful it is, but it has Armia as one of the slower players. So I think when you've got somebody who clearly has a ton of puck skill, right? Like his stick handling is really, really great. You watch him in practice and he's like shooting the puck through the camera hole in the glass over and over again. You think that he should be a superstar, but he isn't able to be consistently that guy, as Chris said. So I think, yes, definitely credit for rebuilding himself this season, whether it was the wake-up call of being sent down to Laval 2 times or what have you. He has done it. He has been an effective player now for 33 games this season. I hope he continues, whether it's with this club or with another at the trade deadline.
But do you think because of that inconsistency that teams are willing to take a chance? Like now he's playing well, but they might say, you know what, he might come to our team and just can't adapt. Do you think that he will be someone that's going to be acquired by another team?
I think every player, there's a risk of that, right? You look at Timo Meier last year, who on the Sharks, who were a terrible team, looked like a superstar, and the Devils pay a huge price to get him, sign him to a massive deal. And in the playoffs last year, he was a bum. He was a bum, like whether he's injured or not, he was playing terrible. And this season, he hasn't been his old self either. We know he's capable, but there's always a risk, I think, in any trade where a player could just be at the best that they can be in the system that they're playing in, and different structure, different teammates, it can throw everything off, right? So I think teams always have to do their due diligence on stuff like that.
And I think management has to, decide, is he part of the future? Is he a type of player that we want to keep, moving forward? Or do we want to change him up? And, for me, hopefully he continue to play well, because he maybe will draw some attention and they can maybe get something in return for him.
Yeah, there's a possibility you're losing Anderson and a Monahan. You're losing a lot of size right there. So with 1 year left on that contract, he may be here for another year. So, again, this is a guy that you got to fit into a team that's going to contend somewhere as a bottom 6 forward who can play in the playoffs. So that being said, what the hell was I had a thought. We're talking. Oh, jeez. Any
teams interested in him? Do you think that they're willing to take a risk?
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Jess. Listen, it never ceases to amaze me the number of general managers around this league that think they can take a player and change him after he's buffooned his way through the first however many years of his career. And the perfect example is Alex Galchenyuk. Enough said. everybody thinks they can reclaim this guy and we'll get him to play. And yeah. And then you get him and you get more of the same. So, he could end up somewhere and do well or not.
Now let's talk a little bit about the goaltenders. How many more games do you think Cayden Primo will play this season?
That's going to depend, I think, on what goes on. Were you going to Rick? I'm sorry.
No,
sorry. Okay.
I think it's going to depend what they're going to do at the trade deadline. Are they going to move Allen? Are they going to be able to move Allen? Does some Stanley Cup contending team need a backup goaltender? Because I believe he's a good backup goaltender. And I think it'll all depend on that. And Cayden Primo, again, I think at times a struggle, but in defense of him, playing behind a team that really struggles in their own end. And that's difficult when you're trying to make your mark in the NHL.
I say give him enough to, make him attractive to be traded. He needs to play, and hopefully he'll play well and he'll draw some attention, because we've said for quite a period of time now, this 3 goalie thing is getting old. And, I'm going to assume that it's not going to continue past the trade deadline.
I think we're all surprised that it's continued into the new year. I think everyone assumed that this would have been solved a while ago, but clearly the market for trades in the NHL just isn't great. It seems like nowadays there are no trades really until the trade deadline. And I don't know how good that is for the league, but either way, I do think it depends highly on whether or not the Canadiens are able to move Jake Allen. If they are, I can see him getting like 8 to 12 more starts the rest of the way. But as it stands right now, probably under 8.
All right, well, that's all the time we have for this week's Hockey Inside Out. Thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you subscribe and like our Hockey Inside Out YouTube channel, and go to montrealgazette.com/newsletters to sign up for the Hockey Inside Out newsletter. And of course, go to hockeyinsideout.com to see all your daily Habs coverage.